How's it going, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel, and if you're returning from a previous video, I appreciate you coming back. In today's video, I'm going to be something a little bit new for me. In all my previous videos, I've either gone over a setup of a piece of gear, or I've done an overview and a breakdown of a particular pouch or something similar. In today's video, I'm going to be comparing two separate pouches that do the same thing, but in a different way. And as evident by the title, that is comparing external versus internal radio pouches and giving you the pros and cons of each. So without further ado, let's begin with the external radio pouches. So an external radio pouch, for example here, I'm going to be using this one, which is very similar to the Eagle design one, but it's made by Excellent Elite. I got this off Amazon. It's official multicam. Yeah, it's held up really well. And then for internal, I'm going to be using the Crye Airlight. So now let's actually get into it. With internal pouches, or external I mean, they mount via MOLLE to the cummerbund or rear plate bag or wherever you mount them. Just use, most of the time, 2 MOLLE strips. This one takes up around 3 columns, or 3 rows, 3 rows. And 2 columns. However, it drops down, so it probably takes up around more like 4 rows of MOLLE. So it drops pretty low. It closes via this buckle on the front here, which you can unbuckle and insert and exert your radio. However, I modified it a little bit by just putting on this pull tab, which allows me to just pull it off to the side and exert the radio that way instead of having to unbuckle it. On the left side of the pouch, you have this flap here, which helps make the pouch tighter around the radio and also allows you to access these side buttons on the radio itself. So I'll show you that. With these external radio pouches, most people tend to run these towards the rear of their gear. That rhymed. So it's out of their workspace, and they don't have this radio taking up MOLLE real estate next to their combat items. So they run it on the rear of their plate bag. However, what you'll have to do in that scenario is run some form of KDU if you're going to have to access the buttons. However, if you are running it on the front of the plate bag, what it allows you to do, although you're sacrificing MOLLE real estate, is you can pull this open, access those buttons on the side here. If this were a real radio, I'm just using a replica one. So you can access those without having to take the radio out. But you can still take it out with ease if you do this bungee cord mod, which is very simple. Now we will move on to the Crye Airlight. I'm not doing a very in-depth overview. This is just kind of a brief explanation of these pouches. So the internal one mounts to the front plate bag via the strip of Velcro here. It rests on top of the front plate bag, and then the cummerbund goes over the top of this, and then over the top of the cummerbund you have your placard. So this is sandwiched in there, and it holds it on really tight. This goes, of course, on the inside of your plate bag, so in this space right here. And with your plate bag and your cummerbund, most of the time there's a gap between, in that corner there. And this goes directly in that gap. So it's not really adding a whole lot of bulk. It of course will add some, but not a huge amount. Not as much as the external radio pouches. However, you are limited to running it on the front of your plate carrier. This one closes via Velcro. Still has the shock cord. So on both of these, if you're holding something super tall, that shock cord will expand to fit it. If you do like the buckle, Crye Precision does send these with a buckle if you prefer that over the Velcro. This pouch can adjust ride height and depth of the radio. Unlike this, there are some externals that do it, just not as much, because with the externals, you are limited because of the MOLLE. So this whole thing is unadjustable for this part, so you may have a little bit down here. Whereas with this, you can adjust the ride height a bunch because of the system Crye did here. This system allows you to reverse it, so it could be on the other side. On your left, I have this mounted on my right, but can go on your left, or you could run dual comms. A lot of people do that. So if you're a shorter guy, you can run it higher or lower, or if you're a taller guy, higher or lower, just wherever it fits the best. I have to run mine a little bit deeper. That works well with me because I have a pretty tall body, and so my stock doesn't hit the top of the radio. Running it lower makes it so there's less bulk up towards my shoulder. Throwing the radio in here is really easy. There is no Velcro opener for these buttons on the side. You can kind of peel the elastic down or just pull the radio up a little bit. The elastic is nice because it makes this pouch as thin as possible, as well as making it super snug to the radio itself, which is really nice. So you throw that on there, just like that, and then you have this pull tab, which does the same thing, whereas you can pull it off to the side and access the radio without even having to fiddle with this Velcro here. Now I will be demonstrating some pros and cons of each of these. So starting out with the external. For your pros, you of course have it so it's out of your workspace. You have it towards the rear of your cummerbund or your rear plate bag, so you don't have the radio up where all your fighting equipment is. Another pro is you don't have to worry about relocation cables. However, you do have to worry about a KDU, but I'll get into that with the cons. The other pro is this is mounted more securely than this one, and I'll explain that a little bit more. So that is mainly the pros of this. Your cons with this, and another pro is it isn't riding on your body, so you won't really feel it or feel the heat from the radio. Now the cons with this are it's out of your workspace. That's a pro and a con. Con is it's not as easy to access a radio. And in order to do that, you'll have to run a KDU. And a KDU is it's kind of like iTac, but it just links to your radio and gives you all the buttons on your radio, but right up here. But what that does is it creates a lot of bulk over the top of your magazines, makes them harder to draw, and just adds quite a bit more bulk. And if you're running iTac, it's really hard to also run a KDU. So there's that. Now with this, pros, it's right in your workspace, easy to access. It's easy to get the radio in and out by yourself if you need to. It fills a empty pocket, an empty space on the plate carrier that is otherwise just vacant. And now for the cons of this pouch. The cons are when this radio starts to get hot, you will feel that heat because it's riding up against your body, and the radio may start rubbing on you. I don't feel it a lot with this pouch. However, if you do feel it, Haley Strategic makes a padded radio pouch, which pretty much eliminates that completely. So that is definitely another option if that's a problem for you. Pros, again, is you don't have to run a KDU on here. However, there is a con, and that is that you most likely will have to run a relocation cable on here. The reason why you'll have to run a relocation cable is because that antenna will be directly in front of you. Granted, there's a pro with that, and that you can pick your nose and not get your gloves or fingers dirty. But the con is that thing is probably going to be whacking you in your face, especially if you're moving fast. So running a relocation cable does add an extra wire to your gear, but it does move that radio out of the way, which is how I run this pouch. Especially if you're running it on your dominant side, you don't want that radio getting in the way of shouldering your rifle. This con is not really a problem for me. I've never had to deal with it. However, I have heard people talk about it. And that is when you mount this to the front of your plate carrier and you put your cummerbund over the top of it. When you go to take your cummerbund off, sometimes this pouch peels and goes with your cummerbund. I have heard people talk about that. That's never happened to me, but it's definitely an issue and something you don't have to worry about with this. So that is kind of the brief pros and cons over these two pouches. So now for personal preference. When it comes down to personal preference, if you've seen my most recent video going on Replicator, you know it's going to be the internal. That is just because then I don't have to worry about a KDU, don't have to worry about having to reach around and grab it if I need to take the radio out. This is right in front, could easily access it without a KDU. It's just right up close to me for all my radio needs, which is really nice. And then I don't have to route my push to talk all the way around my plate carrier. It's just right next to each other, which is really nice too. I didn't cover that, which I should have. But that's really nice. Also, the adjustment on here is really nice, so I could run it at the exact height that I want it to in the exact way I want it to. That is really nice about these internal radio pouches. I did used to run one of these with a KDU, and it worked well. It was nice not having this rubbing against me, but just the cons outweighed the pros in my opinion, and just don't use it that way anymore. Just vastly, in my opinion, this is vastly superior, running it internally. However, everybody is different, and everybody uses their gear a different way. So just because I use this, doesn't mean this won't work for you. And there's hundreds, probably not hundreds, but there's a lot of radio pouches out there. Spiritus, Crye makes quite a few, like this one. There's Eagle ones. There's a bunch. So there may be one that works better for you than either of these two. So just comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. The point of this video is just to show you the differences and similarities and pros and cons of internal versus external radio pouches. And hopefully this helps you if you're trying to pick between the two, or just was entertaining and gave you something to do for however long this video is, probably around 10 minutes. So I hope this did something for you. Even if you're not struggling between picking which pouch, I hope it was entertaining. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.